All right, and good evening. Welcome to Sacramento County's District 1 Redistricting Workshop. Got a little bit of feedback there. Coming to you live from the Fruit Ridge Community Collaborative in District 1. Very excited to be here for our 5th redistricting workshop, where we get an opportunity to talk about what redistricting looks like here in Sacramento County and how our community can participate. So I'm excited to be here today with Doug Yoakum from National Demographics Corporation, who is our demographer, and our very special guest, District 1 Supervisor Phil Cerna. Happy to be here today with you as we learn about redistricting. And Supervisor Cerna has been through this process before, so looking forward to his feedback. Supervisor, do you have any opening remarks you'd like to make?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank the Fruit Ridge Community Collaborative and the residents of South Oak Park for hosting tonight's workshop, and for you, Courtney and Doug, for being here to help our constituency understand the process that Sacramento County has actually already begun, and it's an important one. This is one that we go through every decade, and it's our deliberate and thoughtful attempt to make sure that each of the 5 supervisorial districts in Sacramento County have roughly the same amount of people. So it's kind of a population distribution exercise in some respects as it relates to the political geography of Sacramento County. But this really is the public's opportunity to ask questions and to provide feedback about any concerns or considerations they might have as it relates to everything from making sure communities of interest stay geographically intact and whole, to understanding what has contributed to population growth over the course of the last 10 years and thus the need to perhaps adjust political boundary lines. So I'm just very proud and glad to be a very small part of tonight's agenda, and again appreciate you taking this charge on, Courtney, and I appreciate everyone that's here in person and those that might be watching from the comfort of their homes.
Thank you so much, Supervisor. And yeah, as the Supervisor mentioned, it's important to know that in Sacramento County, the board manages the redistricting process, but they can only do their job based on what the public and what the community says and highlights for them to make sure that we keep those communities of interest together. So that's what we're really going to highlight tonight. And we're lucky to have Doug Yoakum here that will explain the process and how to participate. I also have a few announcements just to make sure everyone knows the various methods on how to participate tonight, as we are streaming live through Metro Cable. We also are live through Zoom, and then of course for the in-person attendees as well. The county is hosting this in-person virtual public workshop to provide an overview of the redistricting process and give a demonstration of the mapping tools that allow for community input. Public input is vital to a successful redistricting project, so we want to make sure we allow for plenty of time during this workshop for questions and feedback, as well as public testimony. National Demographics Corporation, or NDC, will give a presentation for about 15 minutes, and then we will open it up for public comments. Community members can make a comment in person, by phone, or submit comments through the Zoom Q&A feature. It is important to note that any phone comments or questions or comments submitted through Zoom will become part of the official public record and posted to our redistricting website. We will start with in-person comments first, then move to the phone line, and then the Zoom Q&A. And then we will circle through until there are no more public comments. To make a public comment by phone during tonight's presentation, please dial 916-875-2500 and choose option number 1, then follow the prompts to be placed in the queue. You may be on hold for an extended period of time, and your patience is appreciated. I will ask staff to transfer the caller into the workshop, and each caller will have at least 3 minutes to provide input. More time may be allowed, especially as long as we make sure we get through everyone's interest in speaking tonight. The chat feature will not be available through Zoom, but participants can submit questions or feedback through the Q&A feature. Language interpretation services are available for all languages. please call the public comment phone line at 916-875-2500, and staff will connect you with a language interpreter. You and the language interpreter will be transferred into the workshop to make a comment. Additional time will be made available for those using language interpretation services. There will also be an American Sign Language interpreter on your screen at all times. Please be mindful of the time to avoid being interrupted or disconnected. More time may be considered as long as we've heard from all participants. We thank you in advance for your courtesy and understanding, as it is our goal to make sure everyone who wants to speak will be given an opportunity to speak. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, please send a text or call the clerk's office for assistance at 916-599-0112. You can also send an email to boardclerk@saccounty.net, and staff will provide assistance. You can always submit your written comments to redistricting@saccounty.net, or mail them to 700 H Street, Suite 2450, Sacramento 95814, and attention it to the clerk of the board. So a lot of different ways to participate. So thank you so much for coming tonight. And now we're going to turn it over for Doug Yoakum to talk about what redistricting is.
Thank you, Courtney. My name is Doug Yoakum. I'm with the National Demographics Corporation. Our company assists local government with redistricting all over the state. However, I am a 42-year resident of Sacramento County, so I'm not unfamiliar with the geography and the process here in Sacramento. So it's my pleasure to help you, the supervisors, and residents of Sacramento through this process. So let me start by explaining what our timeline is going to look like this year. Oops. Here we go. We've already been through a substantial portion of it. Back in June, we had our first hearing, and then we had virtual hearings. We're in the process of having workshops in each district. Last month, the census put out official numbers of what the population is all over the nation, but it was not something that was readable by humans. It was only readable by machines. So in the last month, the statewide database has been processing that data. And right about today is when they were supposed to be officially releasing the statewide data that all cities and counties and the Redistricting Commission for the state will be using to do redistricting. I just checked. There has not been an announcement made from the statewide database about an official release today, but today was supposed to be the day. We've established, once that data is available, and we will put it up on the redistricting website for Sacramento County, we've established an October 15th deadline for folks to put together any draft maps that they would like to submit to the county. And because November 2nd is the official day of the third official hearing, where we will first look at, hopefully, maps that have been drafted by the community and some that will have been drafted by my company to show to the supervisors. Then we have a fourth hearing for more hearings on maps, and that's November 16th. And the next day is when the county will start its official process of actually putting together a resolution or an ordinance to enact the new redistricting lines. The statutory deadline to get this done for counties all over the state is December 15th. Let me quickly go through, or in detail, hopefully, if I need to, go through the laws that we have to follow as we go through this process. First and foremost, we must make the population of each district substantially equal. That's the language of the Fair Maps Act, that each district must be substantially equal so that it doesn't have any more representation than any other district in the county. We must follow the Federal Voting Rights Act, and I will try to explain that to the best of my ability. We cannot discriminate against a protected class of voters. By that, we mean Latinos, African Americans, Native Americans, or Asian Pacific Islanders, by separating them or combining them in ways that deprive them of their ability to elect a candidate of their choice in a supervisor district. Basically, that means that we cannot, as a policy in the county, start by establishing a standard where we want to divide or draw districts by race. That is not permitted. We can protect communities. We can hear about communities of interest that can be based on ethnicity, and they can tell us whether they want to be together or apart in different districts, but we cannot purposely divide them or combine them in ways that takes away their opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. Last year, California enacted a new law, I've already mentioned it, the Fair Maps Act, that called for certain criteria that must be followed. After equal population, each district must be geographically contiguous. In other words, it has to be together. It cannot be separated at combined at one point and continued in some other part of the county. It has to be geographically contiguous. To the extent possible, we can't divide neighborhoods or communities that establish themselves and tell us what their boundaries are, and we cannot divide them, or we cannot divide a community of interest that's been identified by the county, and I'll explain community of interest a little bit later. To the extent possible, we're going to keep the cities in Sacramento County and what we call census-designated places together. Sacramento, of course, is a city that has a large population, so it will have more than one district. It has to be separated. But Citrus Heights, Folsom, Elk Grove, those are cities in Sacramento County. To the extent possible, we have to keep them together. And places like Harold, Orangevale, Rancho Murrieta, these are census-designated places, and the census actually has drawn lines around them that are identifiable on a map. So to the extent possible, we have to keep those communities together as well. We will be using easily identifiable boundaries. In other words, major streets, freeways, rivers, railroad tracks, things that people recognize on a map so that the districts don't meander in and out and make it difficult for someone who's trying to find out what district they're in. It makes it hard for them to see on a map what district that they're a part of. So we'll be using easily identifiable boundaries. And finally, we have to keep the districts compact to the extent we can, and that means we cannot bypass one large group of people in order to get to another large group of people. There's only one consideration in the Fair Maps Act that is prohibited, and that is we cannot favor or discriminate against a political party. There are other redistricting principles that the board can use as if they choose, because they are not prohibited and they are not specifically mentioned in the Fair Maps Act. So these are discretionary items. To the extent possible, we may want to just minimize the number of voters who are shifted from one election district to another. I'll explain that as quickly as I can. Supervisors are elected for 4 years. There are 2 supervisor districts elected in one year, and then 3 supervisor districts have elections the following year. To the extent possible, we don't want to shift people between a a district that has an election in 2022 and is expecting to go to the polls and elect a new supervisor, to a district that's in 2024 that would deprive them of their ability to have an election on the date that they expected. So if there might be some situations where we have to do that in order to keep populations of various districts equal, but to the extent possible, we want to avoid that. We want to respect the voters' choices that have already been made. In other words, we don't want to put one supervisor in the same district with another so that they're forced to run against each other in a particular election. So today, we will be avoiding that this year. You can take into consideration how a district grows in the future if you expect growth in that district. If you expect an area to have a population increase over the next 10 years, you may want to underpopulate that district, but that requires then that we overpopulate another district. So we recommend that we not go too far on that because we are constrained in the amount of differences we can have in the number of people between each district. So we'll watch that as we go along. And this is a discretionary item that we can use. We can start by using the current districts and adjusting their populations to equalize them. That's sometimes a difficult process because depending on the geography of the county, where the overpopulated districts are versus underpopulated, you may have to go through them to try to make changes to make everybody equal. So we'll see how that goes as we go along. We have made so far population estimates based on a database that our company put together. We estimated, and this is the number at the bottom of this chart, that each district would need about 308,000 people to be equalized. That's probably going to be a little bit more based on the actual census data when it comes out. But this chart shows where the current districts are and whether they're equal in population to the 2020 population or whether they have some deficiencies or overages. As you can see on the right-hand column, District 1 and District 2 technically are compliant. They are balanced. They could go forward into the next election without changes. But because of the other three districts being out of balance, District 3 by about 3%, District 4 by 4%, and District 5, which is the southern district, including Elk Grove and Galt, that is a district that's overpopulated. So based on current lines, we'd have to lose some of the population there and transfer them to the districts in the north. We'll just have to see once the real numbers come out, hopefully today or this week. We'll have to see how that looks and how it works out. So very quickly, we'll go through these. This is what we're looking for in our workshops and in public comments that folks submit to the county. Tell us, what is your neighborhood? What does it look like? What are its boundaries? Is there a community center or a school or a park that represents your community? And what are the boundaries around that define what your neighborhood is? Just tell us and we'll show you on a community of interest form how you can do that. Communities of interest are a little different in that it's a geographic area, but it has a shared issue or a characteristic that unites that community together. There could be an issue, a county issue like parks or transportation or crime or any kind of community of interest that unites a community so that when they come to the supervisors and they're from a district, they are united in speaking to that supervisor and to the board generally about that issue. So that's what we're looking for on a community of interest basis. Here's just the phone number again that that you can call if you'd like to comment tonight. Next, Courtney will talk about the community of interest form, and we will show you it on screen as we go through it so you can learn how to use it.
Great, thank you so much, Doug. So Doug's going to bring up the community of interest form. So we hear the term redistricting and it sounds overly technical, can be off-putting sometimes. So in order to hopefully help facilitate some conversations, we don't expect everyone to remember all the criteria. That's for the board and for our demographers to do. But we do want to hear from the community in terms of what your community of interest is and why it's important for the board to consider as they're making the final decisions in adopting any boundaries. So we have this form that
hopefully it's coming up in a second.
It'll come up in a second, yeah. And this form is used to be able to hopefully prompt organizations, individuals, businesses to be able to state what their community of interest is and what binds them together. So a community of interest is really just what you consider yourself, your history of your community. And we have a few questions on this form, and this form is available in several different languages on the website. And this form is to help kind of prompt and make you think about what your community of interest is. So the first, this form is fillable as well, and the first box says, I would like to keep my community together. And it makes you think about what your community is, who lives there, any socioeconomic factors that might bind them together, housing, social or civic networks, where people go to church, where people go to school, languages spoken. All of those things can help define community of interest, especially when we're thinking from the county perspective, in terms of what county services are provided. And of course, whether you're in the city or not in the city, as we know with District 1, you may or may not have municipal services there, but big hot topics in terms of what your community feels in regards to homelessness or law enforcement or public health. So these are the things that we want our community to think about while the board makes these decisions. It's also important to note that the county is doing our own redistricting effort, and it is different than what the cities are doing, including the city of Sacramento. It's also different than what is happening on the state level. Now, this form, while we created it for Sacramento County, it can also be used to provide your community of interest testimony for any redistricting efforts. Or if maybe you've already submitted a community of interest form for City of Sacramento, or for assembly or Senate districts on the state level, you can use that information and submit it to us. So please don't feel like it has to be on this form. This just hopefully helps guide some of those conversations. There's a place you could put in the physical boundaries. So as Doug mentioned, whether it's freeways or rivers or parks, those sort of things, you can put that here. You can also fill out as much or as little as you would like. You can also share how your community is similar or different than the neighborhoods that are in your vicinity. So we know there's a lot in common and a lot of differences between Land Park to Curtis Park to Oak Park to Tahoe Park. And so we want to know why you feel that those communities are alike. Maybe they have similar economic reasons to want to be kept under the same supervisor. And then also why they're different and should be considered. And we know with Land Park being split up between two supervisors, maybe Land Park wants that. Though when I asked Supervisor Kennedy, he goes, nope. So I don't know about that. But
it's technically two different neighborhoods in my estimation. It's Old Land Park and Land Park.
There you go.
That comes from a Sacramento native. So.
Got it. And see, and those sort of things are really important for us to know and be aware of. I mean, obviously, we're lucky that we have supervisors that are very familiar with their districts. But as we go through these workshops even, we're seeing other kind of community histories come out. And so that's something, on the last line is, if there's something that bonds your community together or something you want to share on why communities should be under the same representative, we'd want to hear that. Something I learned from our District 3 workshop was how Fair Oaks actually has a close bond with Gold River. And I didn't realize that. I guess for work factors, a lot of Fair Oaks went down to work in Gold River and through Aerojet. So that was really interesting to learn. And so again, you guys know your communities best. And so this is a way for you to tell our demographers and then the board why your community should be kept together. So this form can be mailed or emailed, and please note it will be posted online in its entirety, so you probably want to leave out some personal details. So that is definitely one way to be able to participate. And again, it can be as informal as an email as well, so you don't have to use the form, but it does help. You can also print them out to distribute to any neighborhood associations or groups. Also, feel free, you can submit it as an organization, you can submit it as well individually or as a business multiple times. Maybe you forgot something the first go around, you want to submit another one. No problem at all. You can submit or as much or as little as you like. I think, Doug, we were hoping for a October 15th to try to get most of those in. Is that correct?
As soon as we can. We'd like to start our drawing process as soon as the numbers come out, as I said, any day now.
Okay. So the sooner the better, but of course, maybe we don't know till we get to the hearings how things are being drawn, and you might have feedback at that point as well. So it's never too late, but the more you can get now, the better. So another way to participate is through various mapping tools. And we are going to play a short video on what those mapping tools look like and how you can participate now.
Courtney,
yes.
Actually, before we go there, I'd just like to share just a little bit, a very short story, experience that I had during the last redistricting exercise after the 2010 census, and it has to do with community forum. And I just stress this because I think sometimes the general public may think, well, if it's not something that the census collects, whether it's ethnicity data or socioeconomic information, that's all you're left with to help kind of define what you think your community of interest is. Unfortunately, neither the census nor the MAP Act, as far as I know, acknowledges, for instance, LGBTQ households. So that was one of the things that, as a relatively new supervisor during the last redistricting process, I was interested in understanding, even though it's not a formalized data set that comes from the federal government. And that was very helpful, in fact, to conclude at the time to redraw the District 1 boundary to include Old Land Park, because we were finding that there happened to be a large number of gay, lesbian households in Old Land Park that really felt actually more of a connection to places like Midtown and downtown Sacramento, or even Curtis Park, more so than places like Southland Park. So that's an example of how consideration of a community of interest doesn't have to follow kind of the strictness of the federal definition.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and yeah, great history there. And you're right, they identify more with more part of your district in terms of Midtown and downtown. And that's true, that even if you think of something with community of interest and you're not sure if it fits the bill, so to speak, submit it anyway. We want to look at all of it, and as long as it's not strictly prohibited, we can consider it. So that's a really good point. Okay, great. Thank you, Supervisor. All right, so let's go ahead and show the mapping tools another way to participate and submit.
How to submit maps for redistricting. There is a map submission tool for every level of experience and interest, from simple paper maps that you just draw on to complex technical maps with lots of data layers and online submission. Let's discuss which tools are right for you. Step 1. Get informed. Learn more about your district, neighborhood, or community of interest. Resources are available to you in easy-to-read informational maps. They provide population, demographic, and geographical information by using estimated 2020 census data. The story map includes a wide array of geographic and demographic data arranged like a PowerPoint presentation. These simple maps are interactive as you step your way through them to see details about districts and tracts. They can be a great reference for you when you tell your community story to the county. As public map submissions become available, they will be added to the story map as well. The interactive review map is a powerful tool, packed full of layered data such as population, demographics, citizen voting age, and various council and service plan boundaries. Once the redistricting draft maps are ready for release in November of 2021, they'll be added as layers to this tool as well. Step 2. Draw a map. After learning more about the tools and resources available to you, choose a mapping tool and method that works best for you. Simple paper maps are available in 2 formats: estimated population data and city, freeways, and census-designated places data. These simple one-page printable maps can be drawn on and notated, then submitted to the county for consideration. There is also a Microsoft Excel supplemental file available to help calculate the populations if you prefer. Powerful online mapping tools provide greater detail and more layers and features when drawing your districts, neighborhoods, and communities of interest. These tools allow users to save and submit their maps to the county online. The District R online mapping tool is a simple online paintbrush tool that allows you to paint your neighborhood, your community of interest, or a full countywide district map. You can select areas to include in your map, erase unwanted areas, mark important places and landmarks, and add comments to describe your map. The most powerful mapping tool is the Caliper Maptitude online tool. This tool enables you to draw districts by census block with all the demographic data used by the county's demographic consultants. You can fine-tune your district lines and see, in detail, the resulting demographics as you draw your map. This tool requires users to create a free online account. You can use the tool to edit existing district boundaries or draw entirely new ones. The tool provides population counts and demographics of the districts you draw to show the impacts of moving the lines. You can see in real time how your proposed map lines would impact districts. The county redistricting website has some short user training videos that explain the features and steps needed to create, save, and submit your maps. We encourage you to review them. Step 3. Submit your map. If you chose an online option, then you can simply submit through the online tool. Or, if you prefer, you may also print and send to the county by email, mail, or drop it off in person. If you chose the paper-only option, you have the same options to email, mail, or drop off in person. For email, please send to redistricting@saccounty.net. To submit by mail or to drop it off in person, please send to Clerk of the Board, Attention, Redistricting, 700 H Street, Suite 2450, Sacramento, California, 95814. Please note that all submissions are part of the public record and will be posted in their entirety to the Public Comments webpage. For more information on the redistricting process and what you can do to participate, please visit the website redistricting2021.saccounty.net.
All right, wonderful. So a lot of different options to participate and to let the board and our demographers know about your community. I think, Supervisor, did you have any questions or comments before we move to public comment?
I don't. I just, again, want to reiterate and emphasize that I would hope our constituents take advantage of the technology you just saw a video about. And I know it can be a little daunting in terms of the steps and detailed sub-steps to this, but this is really a product of trying to make it, believe it or not, as easy as possible for the folks that I have the good fortune of representing and also my colleagues to give us feedback that affects our decision making, and that's the most important part of this.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, great. Well, let's hear from our community. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to any in-person comments first. If anyone does have either a question, a comment, or if you even wanted to give public testimony regarding your community of interest, I welcome you to come up to the microphone if you're comfortable. It's all you.
Looks like you're it, Alan.
We need the spotlight on you.
So there's no time. This is on, yeah. There's no time clock?
No, I think
okay.
we're, yeah.
I'm not at the city. Thank you. My name's Alan LaFaso. I am a resident of District 1. I'm here on behalf of the Sacramento Stonewall Democrats representing the lesbian, gay, bisexual, I got to do this right. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer plus communities across the greater Sacramento region. So my comment is countywide in nature, even though as I said, I'm a resident of District 6. I was going to say I waited for the friendly supervisor, and since Supervisor Cern has done a lot of my work for me, I'll shorten my commentary. I'm here to ask specifically the county to recognize the LGBTQ plus community as a community of interest. If you tell me I have to do a form, I'll do that. Just a quick comment for the record, since Supervisor Cern addressed it, LGBTQ plus individuals are in a very limited sense recognized in the census just by virtue of if a married couple in a single household, if the two leaders of the household are of the same gender, but that is a limited data point. Numerous organizations, including an important statewide advocacy group, Equality California, has been developing a mapping tool to incorporate lots of other data. I had a question, but you answered it in the presentation. EQCA's data tool interfaces very well with some local mapping tools, but evidently, I'm still learning this, not others. But my question was, do you guys use District R? But you answered my question. So without further ado, hope you will all recognize us as a community of interest, and I appreciate the forum and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Now, Doug, can you touch on that? I mean, regarding community of interest, I mean, is there, I know we kind of say, socioeconomic factors is kind of the big one that we say to bind together, but in terms of being recognized as a community of interest, how would we go about that?
Communities of interest are recognized for all sorts of different reasons, and as regard this particular community, there was a comment, I'm sure the supervisor will remember it, at our August hearing, and they said, I forget the gentleman's name, but he said specifically where LGBTQ community members are located. And to the extent possible, we then now have to consider that and put those communities together in a district where they can be represented. So I will go back over the testimony, and for any community of interest that does that, either through a form or through a public comment here or an email to the Sac County Redistricting webpage, I will consider that as a statement of where that community of interest lies and whether or not we can keep it together in a district.
Could I add to that? And tell me if I'm out of line here or if it doesn't mesh well with the mechanics of what we're attempting to do here in a very short amount of time. But I suspect there's probably no reason, Doug or Courtney, that my constituents, or for that matter, the constituents of the other four supervisorial districts that consider themselves part of the LGBTQ community, couldn't simply tell us what they think the boundary is of various, communities that, kind of understand and self-identify that way, right? So to me, the simple answer is tell us where where you think those communities are. Unfortunately, again, because of the lack of data set that we have compared to other elements of understanding communities of interest, I think we're still in a space where we have to rely more so on anecdotal contributions from our constituents to tell us where you think those boundaries are, or where those communities are prominent. And I would, say that in addition to all the other ways that folks can contribute to understanding communities of interest, my office remains very welcoming to anyone that wants to communicate with us, with my staff, about that subject. And so again, I would just underscore that. And in addition to the testimony we received from an individual earlier about this, and that we received this evening.
That's a really great point. I think bottom line is, tell us and tell us where you think the boundaries are, and it might be slightly different than where your neighbor thinks they are, and that's okay. If we can kind of summarize and get a general idea of those communities and where they go to shop, play, all that information is actually really helpful. So I think bottom line is, don't get put off by terms, just tell us about yourselves and your communities and your neighborhood's history, and that will go a long way. That's a really great point. Okay, so I will ask if anyone, and by the way, I like the District R tool myself, so I'm glad we have that tool. Anyone else that's here in person that would like to make a public comment or a testimony or ask a question? Okay, great, then we will go ahead. Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, do you want to come up?
No, it's less important, I think, than what the other people, but so I would like the other people go first, because I have a chance at the end, maybe I just ask.
Okay, we'll go to the phones, then Zoom, and then we will circle back through. Great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and ask the clerk of the board's office if anyone is on the phone line.
There are no public commenters in the phone queue.
Okay, thanks, Alma. All right, so we do have a few questions from our Zoom Q&A. So we got a pretty good turnout there. And actually, I'm going to take this one first because it talks about communities of interest. And this could be for anyone who wants to answer. Why is it important for communities of interest to be kept together?
The answer is because if you have an issue or a concern that unites you, and you want to take your concern to your elected officials, be they councilmen, supervisors, legislators, it's better for them to understand that they're all part of that interest is represented by a large group within their district. And if that has been identified, then technically or hopefully that community has an impact when they go to a legislator or a supervisor to make a statement or make a point. That's the purpose of identifying communities of interest, and that's why communities of interest generally like to be put in one district so that they have that impact on their particular elected official. If they have an issue and they're divided, that elected official may have less of a concern about hearing about that issue than they would if the entire community was in their district. That's why communities of interest are important, and that's why keeping them together may be important.
And, with communities of interest too, and I know this is a question we've gotten regarding who can participate in terms of either submitting maps or submitting communities of interest form. If there's any sort of requirement, like voting, you have to be a citizen and 18 or over. But when it comes to community of interest testimony, it is open to anyone, because someone might have a great way that illustrates your community of interest better than someone else. So please note that communities of interest form, map submissions are open to anyone. There is no requirement to submit your community of interest during this process. Okay, so kind of going back to the mapping tools, And this is a good question, actually. So, Doug, I look forward to your answer. Are the tools being used to do redistricting for the Board of Supervisors districts the same tools that will be used for redistricting in other government bodies, like school board districts?
The general answer to your question is yes. Like I said earlier, our company currently is working with approximately 180 cities, counties, special districts, school districts all across the state, and we offer the same tools to each one of our clients. Some use all of them. Some use just some of them based on the costs that are entailed in putting them up on their websites. But yes, all these tools are being used by all sorts of entities all over the state in order to do redistricting. District R is the most popular, it seems, because it's relatively less expensive than the comprehensive tool, which is what us professional demographers use, which is that Maptitude tool. But if you apply yourself, you can learn Maptitude and put together a very nice looking plan and submit it, and we will absolutely consider it. And at the complete other end, we get district suggestions on napkins in the past. So we will take anything that somebody wants to draw down on a piece of paper and submit it to the county. We will accept that and interpret it to the extent that we can and tell the supervisors what that input means.
So, Doug, when we're using either the District R tool or the Maptitude, is that something then users say they could submit for Board of Supervisor districts, but they can also, share that with any state efforts to Assembly or Senate? I mean, are these files able to be saved? And
they could, but anything you submit through the Sacramento County District R or Maptitude website is going to be sent back to us at Sacramento. It's not going to go to the statewide redistricting commission or anything else. If you'd like to make copies of it, print it out, send it to either the city commission or the state commission, you can do that. But if you use the electronic save button or the send button, it only comes to us here at Sacramento. So on those two tools, they're limited through our website to Sacramento County.
Thank you. Okay, I have a question for Supervisor Serna. What are some reasons communities of interest may want to be kept together or split apart? What is the impact of having a say in where these lines are drawn?
So thank you for the question. I think that the first part was actually addressed pretty well by Doug in terms of the interest of keeping communities of interest whole. That's certainly one way to look at it, but the other part of this question was what are perhaps some of the benefits of not keeping communities of interest together. And there are examples of both in the district I have the fortune of representing. I mentioned one earlier about Old Lamb Park, but another part of District 1 currently includes a community called Old Florentown. And this is the very southern extent of District 1 on the north side of, basically on the north side of Florin Road and east of Power Inn Road and west of Watt Avenue. And the reason I bring this one up is because when we went through redistricting back in 2011, following the 2010 census, that was a community that was previously in Supervisor Natoli's district, in District 5. Subsequent to some of the line movement that occurred during the redistricting effort back in 2011, District 1 claimed Old Town Florin. District 2, represented by my colleague Supervisor Kennedy, moved to include the southern part of that same stretch of Florin Road. And District 5 kind of moved off further to the south and to the east. Now, the benefit of that, quite frankly, is that some of the community activists there, and they're mostly dedicated to the history and culture of Old Florentown, have noted that they get the attention of all three of us when they have an issue. It's not uncommon for all three of us to attend the same community events down there. And, you know, in the case of Supervisor Natoli, I think if he were here, he would say it's largely because he's been on the board so long, representing that community for so long, that he didn't really want to sever that, you know, formally sever that representational tie with Old Florentown. And of course, in the case of Supervisor Kennedy and myself, we literally have either side of the street. So that's a case where I think, you know, kind of depending on the size and the type of community interest, you know, you could see some benefit to having the attention of three of us versus just one of us. But again, you know, I think making sure that communities of interest, as it relates to kind of the efficacy of advocacy, is probably the lens that if I were just, you know, in the audience today asking my supervisor the same question, I'd want to understand how that can be best preserved to continue to, you know, make sure that the individual that I elect to the Board of Supervisors hears loud and clear what our concerns are, is responsive, understands how important that community is compared to all the others. Not that one's more important than the other, but you know, we have 1.5 million people in a 1,000 square mile area to represent, and there's 5 of us. And so that could be very, very challenging sometimes in terms of the number of issues that come across the dais at us at any given time, and you know, the order of magnitude of some of those challenges are massive. I mean, the homeless public policy issue is probably the most daunting right now. So, you know, that's why I think really kind of understanding the import of what a community of interest is and how it functions and how it can be best represented is something to really take to heart during this process.
You know, Supervisor, you mentioned something that I don't think has been brought up before regarding kind of continuity. And, you know, the fact that you and other supervisors work very hard, whether it's for planning or for some social programs. I mean, you have a history with these districts, so you know, it makes sense to want to obviously make sure that we hear from them, but also the fact in Supervisor Natoli's instance, you know, that you guys kind of work together to make sure that those communities are represented, even if they don't fall in your district, you know. So that was an interesting point.
I will just add too that it's very, this is a nuance that sometimes gets lost, but because we have the 7 cities and then the unincorporated county, in a county that has more population in the unincorporated parts of the county than the largest city, that means that we, the county, provide a great deal of municipal services to, you know, hundreds of thousands of people. When it comes to something like the city of Sacramento and who's going to be the supervisor that represents a portion of that, and we have 2, right? We have Supervisor Kennedy and myself that represent the city of Sacramento. That means that the people that we represent need to understand that for municipal services for those communities that are in the city, I still represent you. We just don't have much control over the municipal service delivery. That's relegated to the city of Sacramento. What that does for a supervisor like myself and a supervisor like Supervisor Kennedy is that it gives us a different flavor of workload because, for instance, that is why if you look at my record, and I'm not here to talk about my record in detail, but if you look at the things that I've focused on, they tend to be non-municipal service related. They tend to be public health or child welfare. And that's because in terms of our daily service, our daily function as supervisors, that changes dramatically from person to person on our board because of that political geography.
That makes sense. So what you're telling me is you can't help me with my parking ticket that I got in Midtown. Okay.
That is what I'm telling you.
All right. All right. Thank you. That was really interesting. Okay, so a few more questions here. oh, this is interesting. Actually, speaking of Supervisor Natoli, in considering size, that you're evening out the whole purpose of this process, do you only look at population or do you also consider geographical size?
We only consider population. To the extent possible, we're supposed to keep districts compact, but that is the 5th out of 5 different criterias that we are supposed to prioritize, with population equality being the first consideration. We're to the extent possible, according to the Fair Maps Act, we're supposed to keep districts compact, but the most important consideration, as I said earlier, is population equality.
Got it. So it really comes down to population, which is why if you go to our current maps that are on our website, you'll see huge District 5 with all that rural area. We obviously know District 5 has grown. We've known parts of Natomas and District 1 have grown as well. There is a lot of growth going on, so it'll be interesting to see what comes. You have quite the task in front of you, don't you? So kind of along the same lines, this is a really good question. Once the redistricting is complete, will we be able to see which communities of interest or other reasoning came into consideration for the boundaries? How are you going to relay that to us?
First of all, any community of interest commentary will be on the website. People who identify a community of interest will hopefully fill out a form or send an email, and it will be posted on the website. At the end of the process, those have to be preserved by the county for the next 10 years. So anybody can look at it from now until the next time we do redistricting. I think that answers the question, but if there's anything else people want me to add, I would be happy to.
Well, and I would add to that, Doug, that certainly there's going to be a great deal of activity literally in our board chambers with the board's deliberations and considerations of different ways to go in terms of alternative maps, right? So there's going to be a public record of the supervisor's conversation in public, and rightly so, as well as anyone that wants to provide testimony at those hearings about communities of interest. So ultimately, you're going to have, I think, multiple outlets to understand the history of why the final map appears the way it does in terms of preserving communities of interest.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think kind of stresses the importance of really watching those November hearings, because, depending on what people have either submitted so far or what things you think, later, oh gosh, it looks like this community is being split, let's go ahead and make sure we provide some public comment. It's going to be really important to watch that. So we do have the full list of hearings on our website at saccounty.net/redistricting. Okay, we got another one here, and then we'll circle back to in-person to see if your question is still there. So the last question we have right now is, are all counties in California undergoing this process at the same time?
Yes, and all counties in California have the same December 15th deadline for getting it done. And the reason for that is because all counties have election systems where they have primaries in June and November elections, so that in order to get ready for the June primary, these districts need to be complete in December, so folks like Courtney can get their GIS people together and start re-precincting the county and figuring out where everybody goes as far as districts are concerned.
Yeah, so while counties are going through this, though, it's important to note that not necessarily all cities will be going through it at the same time, or at all if they don't elect representatives by district. Is that correct?
That's correct. The cities have a deadline of April 17th of next year, and the school district's deadline is March 1st of next year. And that includes community college districts as well.
So what we're saying is you can definitely use November to just focus on the county. It's totally fine. Okay.
Courtney, before we go to questions that remain here from people that have joined us in person, I've got a question. It's the same question I asked several weeks ago during a board hearing when we got a presentation from Doug, and I want to ask it again because I think it's an important one to reiterate, and that is, can this process be used to quote unquote fix past gerrymandering, the results of past gerrymandering?
Yes. If folks think that a map looks strange or was done improperly 10 years ago, now's the time to fix that. Tell us what you think was done wrong, and tell us what would make it better. That's the reason for redistricting, and that's the reason for allowing the public to participate in redistricting, because sometimes either myself or members of the board who weren't involved 10 years ago are not as aware of what's gone wrong as in the past. So please tell us, and we will to the best of our ability fix it.
And it's also why we have the Fair Maps Act. That gives us kind of the criteria of things we need to make sure that we consider. And if there's any prohibitions, like in this case for Fair Maps Act, it's not looking at any political parties.
Correct.
So that's important. Yeah, very good. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to open it back to see if anyone in the room has any questions or feedback. Great. Did you want to come up to the microphone or just?
It was okay, I'll just.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I wanted to say that I don't represent any community. I just came here because I've had for many years an interest in redistricting, perhaps a theoretical matter, and also kind of the Supervisor Serna, with whom I worked many years ago, is going to be here. So, I guess one of the things is when you see something like this pink part here that's sort of barely connected to the rest of the map, and some of these appendages, I always thought that, there might not be anything wrong, or a suspect might be perfectly reasonable, but I think just the appearance is sort of not great. And so, you mentioned the compactness was fifth, and so it always seemed to me that, we should try to make things geometrically more convex and compact to the extent possible, so it just looks better. That way people have less reason to give rise to suspicions. And I guess the other thing is, I learned today, which I didn't know before, that under this Fair Map Act, some other things are really high priority. Like, I guess you should say holding cities together. I guess that's a done deal, because you can make an argument on the other side. Let's say District 5, it's 300,000 people, but 200,000 people of those are in Elk Grove. Well, that's great if you're in Elk Grove, and it's good to give the people in Elk Grove. People in Elk Grove love it, they have lots of ways. But what if you're not in Elk Grove? Then in some sense, you could argue you have less voice, and is that really fair? And in other words, having the same number of people is obviously the first and key criteria. But after that, whether you keep a city together, whether you keep a neighborhood together, versus, on the other hand, the compactness and the geometry, are those priorities already specified, the ordering in the Fair Map Act, or is there balancing that's done? I guess those
Right.
So sorry, just to reiterate for the microphone.
Go ahead.
Just
Go
to
ahead.
make sure. So one was regarding the map itself and how the past districts were laid out in a very odd manner that could raise some questions. And then versus, the consideration of city versus compactedness. And go ahead.
The order in which we are to consider the criteria is the order that I listed them on that slide. Compactness is the last one, but keeping cities and census designated places together is a higher priority. So if you're looking at a district and you're drawing it up and you're seeing what the population is as you go along, and you've realized that you've split Carmichael down the middle, you may want to go back and say, okay, what can we do to fix Carmichael and add some other population somewhere else so that we can make an equal district, but keeping it in that general area so as to make it compact as possible.
I would just add too, the real challenge in this, and some may say, well, this, with the numbers being what they look like they're going to be in terms of the amount of change that we can expect for Sacramento County. It may seem like it's not that drastic. In fact, Doug pointed out for districts 1 and 2, we're kind of well within already the margin of error, so to speak, in terms of population redistribution. But the fact remains is that we're every time you make a change in the process of changing boundaries to keep communities whole, you have to be really careful that you don't exacerbate the problem somewhere else. And with 7 cities and hundreds, maybe thousands of, probably thousands of neighborhoods countywide, I know hundreds within just the city of Sacramento alone, taking that all into simultaneous consideration is very kind of labor intensive. That's why, with the advent of GIS and the advent of different cartographic technologies and platforms, it's much easier to do that in real time and understand the consequence of changing some of those boundaries as they're made. But I can tell you, having gone through the experience in 2011 the way we did, there must have been, I'm guessing, probably 60 to 70 iterative maps that the board was considering over the course of several weeks. And you would have deliberations or conversations about one set of preliminary maps, and then someone would point out, well, that means you're going to have to split up Galt or something. And that's why that's why the priorities are the way they are. At least that's what I assume is the reason.
Yeah, and I think that comes even more important with the hearing from the community itself to help make some of those decisions on whether or not either keeping a community of interest together or splitting it. What the impact might be, and to make sure that we all know that. Okay, thank you. Did you have anything else? Or
I think that's sort of the answer. I think that Supervisor Serna said, I guess, that it would be too complicated even to try to weigh them. So you have to have a specific priority order. And so that then makes sense for why you did it. I mean, I suppose some people would want a different order, but it makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, and and also, I mean, if there's enough obviously we know some cities, like City of Sacramento, will have 2, but if there's enough, whether community of interest or compactedness to keep it together, and there's enough reasoning for that, then we'll definitely want to make sure we look at that. Great. Anyone else in person? Yes, ma'am, would you like to come to the microphone? Yeah.
Thank you. So when you spoke earlier, you spoke how the community of interest form can be completed by all. I'd like to have clarification. Does that mean that you do not have to be a citizen and you could be as long as you're a resident, meaning that you can be just a legal resident?
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Yes, correct. You do not have to be a citizen to complete a community of interest form. You can be 12 years old and maybe you have like the best, maybe you already did a kind of community history project and you want to go ahead and submit it to us, great. We have a lot of folks in our county that know the history of our county, and so we want to make sure we hear from them all. So correct, you do not have to be a citizen. There's not even a requirement regarding a residency status. So anyone that has feedback and wants to participate can, because this is not about just voters. This is even though it's the voting age population, they might have the best ideas for communities of interest.
Then the second question, if you could explain, how did the Folsom prison numbers affect the redistricting, please?
Yes, I just gave a talk about this in Folsom last week. The city of Folsom has 2 prisons. We all know them. But the legislature passed a law several years ago that said that the Department of Corrections is required to send a list to the statewide database, which is an entity of the legislature, that reallocates the prisoners who are in those prisons and any other prison in the state back to their original location. So if the prisoner was convicted of a crime in Los Angeles and lived in Los Angeles, that person will be reallocated back to the census block where they were in Los Angeles prior to their imprisonment. So when you go on these tools, and when the statewide data is put on them within the next couple of weeks, and you click on Folsom Prison, there will be a 0 there. And according to the database, there are no people there. All of those people have been reallocated to where they came from. And if they came from Folsom, if they came from Sacramento, if they came from Fairfield, wherever their home address was, that's where that individual is now located. So Folsom Prison, both of them, will have 0 counts when you click on them on these redistricting mapping tools.
And Doug, was that a recent rule change, or when did that go into effect?
My recollection is that law went into effect in 2015. Don't quote me on that, but it's not part of the Fair Maps Act. It was done prior to establishing the rules for how cities and counties were going to draw districts.
Got it. Great. Thank you so much for that question. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and try one more time with the phones. With the clerk of the board's office, is anyone in the phone queue?
We do not have any callers in the phone queue.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, I did get another question through Zoom, and of course I can always count on Lauren Hammond to throw out some numbers I don't understand. Don't you have the actual PL 94171 census data yet? I don't know what that means.
The answer is yes. That was what was released in August, and like I say, it was released in a machine readable form, so that entities like the statewide database that can put together a database based on that we can all look at and use on these computer tools. They did that after the PL 94171 tape was released. That's a technical term that the Census Bureau uses with us redistricting nerds, and so it was probably a redistricting nerd that asked that question.
Lauren knows her stuff. In fact, Lauren and Teresa have won the prize for most attendees at all redistricting workshops.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So, okay, one more question that I have here. So I know we kind of touched on this a little bit regarding the November hearings and how we're going to participate, but Doug, what does your workload look like now over the next month or so as you go to prepare some draft maps for the board to consider?
Well, I will, we have one more of these workshops to do, and that's in the city of Elk Grove. I think it's week after next.
October 4th.
We'll complete that process. It is my hope that by that time we will have on our redistricting website for Sacramento County actual numbers that people can use to draw actual districts and submit them either on the website or bring them in on paper to downtown or wherever you can submit them to a supervisor's office or anything like that. And then I'm in charge of categorizing what those comments are, and hopefully some of them will be similar so that I can group them together. Then I'll prepare a report for the board on what the comments are, and then we'll look at the maps that people have actually drawn and submitted and see if there's any common things that we can look at there. But if there's not, I will simply summarize for the board. We've got this many submissions. Some of them treated this district this way or this way, this other way. I'll put them in categories and I'll summarize them for the supervisors. And then based on all of these considerations, all of these comments that we hear now, between now and then after that first redistricting hearing, In November, I will prepare maps for consideration by the board, and the board will say, this is great, these are great ideas, we'll do this one and we'll take a vote, or this is wrong, you've done it completely wrong, go back, do it again. I've been in this business for a long time, and I'm prepared for either one of those answers. So we'll submit what we've seen, summarize for the board what folks are saying, come up with some proposed maps, and then based on commentary from the public and from supervisors themselves, we will draw a final map that it must be posted 7 days prior to the adoption of that map. It has to be posted 7 days before the supervisors can say, okay, we're gonna adopt that map.
Wow, you have your work cut out for you, as
And
do
I'm
you.
not doing, and I'm doing it for several jurisdictions at the same time, not just Sacramento County. So my wife will not be seeing me.
And just out of curiosity, have you actually worked for a district and they said, perfect, first go around? Yep, you got
No,
it.
that's never happened in my life, in my history.
Well, you never.
And my commentary to Ms. Hammond is, good luck. Good luck with what you're doing, and I hope you wish me good luck with what I'm doing.
All right.
Courtney, I don't think you
Because
have
there are
anyone
some
left in the
folks
queue.
out there like Ms. Hammond who have done some interpretation of the numbers that have already come out, and can do a little figuring based on what they've figured based on the computer programs that have been put together.
Any more questions in the queue?
Nope, it's clear.
So I know we have a few minutes left here. I think it's important, Courtney, if you can just expand on just very briefly the changes in outreach that we've committed ourselves to this time versus in times past, especially with some pretty clear directives from the federal government. I think that would be worth a quick mention.
Yeah, so we've, luckily, we have amazing community partners, and our goal is to let folks know that this effort is taking place and that it is different than other redistricting efforts happening around the state. We have some of those folks right here that have helped us. But the idea is, sometimes we hear the term redistricting and it sounds just overly technical. And so our goal is to go out and to reach out to communities. And we have a whole list of partners on our website of those that we've worked with and those that have supported, whether our workshops or we've had meetings. We've discussed communities of interest form. We've discussed the website itself, including putting prior maps up on the website. And this outreach will continue. We've done this through the summer, but we are available for any, whether it's a business, a neighborhood association, a group or individuals, book club, whatever you want. We want to be there to talk about this, to make sure that it's something that the public knows that it's happening, one, and that also it's very important how to participate, because that is the only way we will have free and fair elections. So we want to make sure our representation is who the people want. This isn't where representatives get to pick their people. Now it's the people get to pick their representatives. So this process is really important, and we can't make those decisions, and the board can't, or our demographers can't make that decision without the public input. That's why, whether it's the maps, communities of interest form, or as Doug mentioned, just notes on a napkin, or your testimony today makes a big difference.
Thank you.
And I'll be here. We have some computers set up and back. If anyone wants a demonstration of any of the tools, I will be here to help you understand that.
And if you do have either requests for presentations or information, or you want us to print out some flyers or materials for you, including translated versions, you can email redistricting@saccounty.net. And so before we close up here, I wanted to check with Supervisor Cerna if you had any closing remarks.
I just want to again express my appreciation for you, Courtney and Doug, for your determined attention to make this a very inviting process, and hopefully, and I'm confident it will produce what we can all be proud of, which are perhaps some new political maps for Sacramento County that reflect the changes in population over the last 10 years. I also want to express my thanks to the folks that took time out of their evenings to join us here today at the Fruit Ridge Community Collaborative, as well as my staff. My Chief of Staff, Lisa Nava, is here as well. And those that added to the conversation tonight with great questions through Zoom. Thanks for your attention and for participating.
Great, thank you. And yeah, we got some great questions through the Zoom Q&A. So really, we really like this format. Allows for in-person and virtual participation, which is exactly what we need right now. But if you, again, for those that are here in person, Doug is here to show you the mapping tools. I do want to give a special thanks to our Department of Technology and Clerk of the Board and the elections staff for all the work that they've been doing for this effort. And thank you, Supervisor Cerna, for joining us tonight, and for the Fruit Ridge Community Collaborative for allowing us use of this great space. I think this is the best space we've had yet. So this meeting will be posted online. So if you've missed it, no problem. If you want to look at past meetings, past workshops, or past hearings, you can go to redistricting2021.saccounty.net to be able to view all videos. And again, this will be posted probably tomorrow with the video. So thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank you for your participation. We really appreciate it. Have a good night.